I used to work night shifts as a security guard at the old St. Emilien's Medical Center. It's been closed since the late 90s. Urban legend says the place is haunted, but people say that about any crumbling building with broken lights and rusted gurneys. I took the job because it paid better than I expected, and I needed the cash. All I had to do was make rounds, check for squatters or trespassers, and stay awake between midnight and 6 a.m. Easy work. Or so I thought. The third night was when it started. It was about 2:17 a.m. when the hospital's lights flickered. Not uncommon. The place was old, the wiring garbage. But then I saw it. Room 733. I'd passed that room twice already. The door had always been open, just another empty patient room like the others. But now the door was closed, and the little light above it was on. It was the only door on the entire floor with light. I checked the clipboard of rooms. 733 wasn't on it. In fact, the 7th floor wasn't even on the patrol route. I was only supposed to go as high as the 5th. So I did what any bored, slightly creeped out night guard would do. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Rotting meat and disinfectant. Like someone tried to clean up something horrible, but only made it worse. The light in the room buzzed like a hornet's nest. And in the center of the room was a hospital bed. Strapped to it was a patient. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. Maybe another guard was hazing me. But this guy wasn't moving. He wasn't struggling. He just lay there, strapped down with thick leather restraints. I backed out and radioed down to Dennis, the guy monitoring the cameras in the security office. "Dennis, do we have anyone on file for room 733? Static. Dennis? Still nothing. I looked back into the room. The patient was sitting up, but the straps were still locked. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his head, slightly cocked to one side. Then he spoke. "You're late." I slammed the door and nearly fell over running down the hallway. When I got to the stairwell, I heard it. The door to room 733 clicking open behind me. That should have been my last night. I should have quit then and there. But I didn't. I convinced myself I imagined it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe it was a squatter who somehow broke into the room and pulled a prank. But the next night, the same door was open again, and this time the bed was empty. At 3:33 a.m., I heard a scream echo through the hospital. Not like a scream of pain. This was guttural, animalistic. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward it. Every hallway I passed felt wrong. The air was heavier, like walking underwater. The emergency lights were flickering in rhythmic pulses. Every time they flashed off and back on, it felt like the hallway had shifted. Finally, I found where the scream had come from. It was the elevator. The doors were wide open, but the inside was drenched in blood. Not smeared, sprayed. Splattered all across the ceiling, the floor, the buttons, and something else. A handprint. A single bloody handprint dragging across the back wall of the elevator, like someone had been pulled away. But there was no body. I turned to leave, and there, standing in the hallway behind me, was the man from room 733. Still restrained, still in a hospital gown, still staring. "She's almost done with you," he said. "What?" I stammered, backing away. He just tilted his head. "She likes the ones who watch." Then, without moving his legs, he slid into the elevator, like he was on invisible wheels. The doors closed behind him, and the scream started again. This time I ran. Back in the security office, Dennis was gone. His chair was overturned. The monitors were cracked like something had punched them from inside. But there was one screen still working. The camera feed from room 733. The bed was back. The patient was back. And standing next to him was a nurse. Except she had no face. Just smooth skin where her eyes and mouth should have been. She leaned close to the restrained patient, and I swear to God, he smiled. Then the camera feed went black. I didn't go back the next night. I called the security company and quit over voicemail. I never picked up when they called back. I moved out of state, tried to forget about St. Emilien's, told myself it was stress, hallucination, isolation. But 2 weeks ago, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Me in room 733, strapped to the bed, smiling. I didn't think much of it when they called me back to nights. I'm not a nurse. Not really. I'm an observer, a warm body that sits in the corner of a patient's room and makes sure they don't yank out their IV or crawl out of bed and snap their hip. It's boring. It's silent. Sometimes you read. Sometimes you stare at the wall and hope the next 8 hours pass without anyone flatlining. I got called to 6C, psych overflow, nights only. One patient on suicide watch, the other confused and combative. Double room, not unusual. But there were 3 beds. That was the first thing. The room was cold, too cold for the heater to be on. The overhead light flickered in a slow rhythm, like it was breathing. Bed 1 was by the window. A rail-thin old man named Ellis who kept trying to eat his oxygen tubing. Bed 2, by the door, was a woman named Cynthia who talked in her sleep, sometimes in English, sometimes not. Bed 3 was empty, pulled to the far corner. It wasn't in the chart, no nameplate, but it was made. The blanket folded at the foot, pillow slightly indented, like someone had just gotten up. I mentioned it to the charge nurse. She squinted at me like I was stupid. "There are only 2 patients," she said. "If you're tired, grab coffee. Don't start getting weird." Night 1 was uneventful, just whispers. Cynthia mumbled in her sleep again, but this time I could make out some of it. They shouldn't have brought it in, shouldn't have let it feed. I wrote it down in my logbook, mostly out of boredom. Ellis had wet the bed twice, and my back was already killing me from helping turn him. At around 3:12 a.m., the lights dimmed. Not turned off. Dimmed. Everything went sepia, like the hospital was bleeding color. I stood up, thinking maybe power was fluctuating again, like it does during storms, but my phone still showed full charge. That's when I heard the 3rd bed creak. Very softly, metal springs, pressure on fabric. Someone was lying down. Night 2, I asked to be reassigned. The supervisor laughed. "New guy jitters," she said. I wasn't new, I just knew better. But I went back anyway, because the pay was decent, and because I didn't want to look weak. That's the worst thing you can be in a hospital. Weak. One bad shift and you're a liability. I brought a thermos, I brought a flashlight, and I brought a cheap pocket knife, just in case. The patients were quiet that night. Ellis was asleep by 10. Cynthia stared at the ceiling, murmuring something about The old wing and the doors that don't open anymore. I tried to ignore her, but at exactly 2:44 a.m., the curtain around bed 3 pulled shut by itself. It didn't flutter like it caught a draft. It pulled, like a hand reached out and yanked it shut. My flashlight flickered as soon as I stood up. It caught just enough to show the outline behind the curtain. Someone was sitting on the bed, upright, watching me. I backed out of the room and waited in the hallway until the end of shift. I didn't clock out. I didn't care. I just needed to be away from it. Night 3 was my last. They put me back in the same room. No one else was available. When I opened the door, the curtain was already pulled. The third bed wasn't empty anymore. The blanket was disturbed. The pillow was flattened. A used surgical mask was folded on the sheet. No visitors had come. No one had been admitted. But something had stayed. Cynthia was in restraints. The night nurse said she'd attacked the tech who gave her meds. They let it in, she kept whispering. They let it in through the bed. I didn't sit that night. I stood in the far corner, flashlight trained on the curtain. It didn't move for hours, until the clock hit 3:33 a.m. The lights died completely, not dimmed, gone. The emergency floodlights didn't kick on. My flashlight crackled and went dark. All I had was the sound of breath. Not Ellis, not Cynthia. It came from the curtain, ragged, wet, wrong. Then a whisper, too close to my ear. This room was never for 3. Something moved fast across the floor, crawling maybe. The air turned hot and coppery, and my knees buckled. My hand found the wall, and my fingers touched something slick. I thought it was condensation at first. It wasn't. It was blood, running down the tile, from the ceiling. When the lights came back on, Cynthia was sitting upright in her bed, eyes completely black. Not metaphorically, not dilated, black, like ink had replaced the irises. She smiled and said, "I told you it would choose." Then she flatlined. The doctors blamed an undiagnosed aneurysm, said the pressure had been building for days, ruptured during sleep. Ellis was discharged the next morning. I tried to quit, but the supervisor said my contract still had 2 weeks. I never went back. The next day, I found my logbook on the passenger seat of my car. I hadn't taken it home. There was one new entry, dated last night. Just a single sentence. "You watched, so now you'll always see." I don't sleep anymore, not because I'm scared. I mean, yes, I am. But more than that, I hear things in my sleep. Beds creaking, curtains rustling, breathing, just inches from my face. And when I do close my eyes, I dream of room 6C, and that third bed is never empty. I didn't believe in ghosts until the night they wheeled the dying man into room 633. I was a night orderly at Carter Hills Medical, a sprawling hospital built in the 1950s, now partially abandoned in some places. You know the kind: flickering fluorescence, cracked tiles, peeling asbestos warnings, still barely visible beneath layers of institutional beige. I'd been working nights for about 8 months when this all happened. Carter Hills was divided into 3 wings. North and East were operational. South Wing had been shut down after a flood 6 years ago and never fully reopened. Mold issues, asbestos, some lawsuits, typical bureaucratic decay. It wasn't even connected by the main hallway anymore. They literally walled it off, drywall and all. But for some reason, our patient tracking system still had room 633 listed as in use. That alone should have tipped me off. The night started like any other. 2 cups of burnt coffee from the vending machine, a half-dead pager clipped to my hip, and the usual stack of admission files. At around 1:17 a.m., I got a call from ER dispatch. Patient transfer, critical condition, going up to 633. I paused. That's not a room we use. The nurse on dispatch, Tanya, sounded annoyed. That's what it says in the system. ICU is full. Just take him there until we can move him in the morning. But South Wing is sealed. You can't even get to it. Long pause. Then, Jake, the hallway's open. I hung up, grabbed my clipboard, walked toward the corridor that should have ended in drywall. It didn't. The wall was gone. In its place was an open corridor, long and dimly lit. The air was heavier, slightly damp, as if it hadn't been ventilated in years. I looked behind me. No one was around. And yet, I stepped inside. The gurney arrived 10 minutes later. 2 transport guys I didn't recognize, no badges, just plain scrubs. The patient was covered in a sheet, but I could tell by the shape that he was emaciated. One of the men, pale and sweating, looked at me and said, "He can't be near others. Put him here." I asked what was wrong with the guy. They didn't answer. The moment they left, the air changed again. The hallway felt colder. I swear I could hear breathing, wet, rattling, not mine. And it wasn't the patient's either. He hadn't moved once since he arrived. I pulled the sheet back slightly and saw his face. I've seen death before. I've seen strokes and seizures, roadkill, overdoses, you name it. But this was not a face that belonged to a living person. It was slack and sagging, eyes rolled too far back in his skull, as if he were looking at something inside his own brain. His skin was blotched black and blue like deep rot. His mouth twitched now and then, involuntarily. His lips were black. I marked him as unresponsive, set up the vitals monitor, and nearly jumped out of my skin when the ECG flatlined the moment I touched it. Dead. But I had just seen his mouth move. I double-checked. No pulse, no heartbeat. I backed away. Then his eyes opened. Not slowly, not like a man waking up. They snapped open like 2 shutters slamming into place. And they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. I turned. The room was empty. I turned back. And now he was sitting upright. His mouth opened and he whispered something I'll never forget, even though I wish I could. "There's someone behind your face." The lights in the hallway blinked out in a rapid cascade, starting from the end and rushing toward me like a wave. Boom, 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 until the last bulb above me flickered and died. I tried my radio. Static. I ran to the door. It was locked. No, welded shut. I swear to you, where the hinges had been, metal had fused to the frame, as if the hospital itself had sealed the room from the outside. I backed away, checked on the patient. Gone. The bed was empty, but then I heard it. A wet, dragging sound, like a body being pulled across tile. It was coming from beneath the bed. I lowered myself slowly, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. Got onto my hands and knees. Something was under there. Not the man. Something else. Something too pale. Its skin shimmered wetly. It had no eyes, but it was grinning. I screamed, backed into the 4th stand, knocked it over, scrambled for the door, still sealed. That was when the lights came back on. and the room was empty again. No bed, no no vitals machine, just me, and the dried outline of something large that had been dragged across the floor. I don't remember how I got out. They found me 3 hours later, sitting cross-legged in the main hallway, covered in dust and blood that wasn't mine. The south wing was walled off again, sealed tight like it had never been open. No one could explain how I got there. The CCTV cut out for 3 hours. The patient's name didn't exist in the system anymore. I was sent on psychiatric leave. I didn't fight it. I went back a few weeks ago. Couldn't help myself. Room 633 isn't listed anymore. But when I walked past the corridor to the old south wing, the drywall shimmered. And behind it, just for a moment, I saw it again. The pale thing with no eyes, still grinning. I never meant to go back to the hospital. I had seen enough death when my mother passed. Holding her hand in the oncology ward, watching her fade one breath at a time, it carved something hollow in me. After that, hospitals became places I avoided like cemeteries. But life has a way of dragging you back into your fears. It was supposed to be a one-night favor. My friend Mark worked security at St. Augustine Memorial, an aging hospital with half its wings shut down due to lack of funding. He had called out sick, begged me to cover a night shift. Just sit at a desk, monitor the hallway outside the unused East Wing, and file a few hourly check-ins. Easy money. He didn't tell me the East Wing had been sealed since the fire. He didn't tell me it was the night ward. 12:02 a.m. The lights above me flickered as I signed into the log sheet. The chair at the security post outside the East Wing creaked under me. I settled in and opened my book. The hallway stretched to my left, pitch dark past the first two doorways. On my right, the double steel doors to the East Wing sat, locked, chained, and sealed with faded biohazard tape. I should have turned around when I noticed the tape was cut. Not torn, not weathered. Cut clean, like with scissors. 12:44 a.m. The power went out, not hospital-wide, just the hallway I was in. My flashlight buzzed on, but only dimly. The emergency wall lamps should have come on. They didn't. Something about the silence made me put the book down. That's when I noticed the door to room 241 was open. I hadn't heard it, but it had been shut earlier. I was sure of it. It swung inward, revealing nothing but darkness. My flashlight flickered. I should have called for backup, but my radio had no reception and my phone refused to unlock. It just pulsed white for a moment and shut off. I stepped toward the door. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Maybe that itch in your brain that says, if you see something wrong, fix it. The air turned thick, like breathing through a wet towel. The smell hit me halfway down the hall. Antiseptic, burned plastic, and something else, like rotten syrup. Room 241 was empty, except for the bed, and the man lying in it. He was strapped down, arms, legs, chest. The restraints were so tight they cut into his skin. No monitors, just him, pale, frail, with a black hospital band around his wrist. The name was unreadable, just smudged ink where letters used to be. His eyes were open, bloodshot. He whispered, "They feed after 3. Then he started screaming. I bolted. I ran back to the desk, slamming the panic button. Nothing happened. No alarm, no response. The screaming stopped the moment I crossed the threshold of room 241. I looked back. The bed was empty. 1:17 a.m. I heard wheels, gurney wheels, squeaking. I turned and saw a stretcher rolling down the hall by itself. Slow, methodical. On it was a covered shape, white sheet, bulging at the chest and face. A toe tag dangled limply. The gurney stopped in front of room 243. The door opened by itself, and the gurney rolled in. The door slammed shut. 2:09 a.m. I found a patient chart on the floor near the east wing door. It was old, browned with age, the paper brittle. Patient, unknown. Status, admitted 3 a.m., September 2nd, 1998. Diagnosis, NA treatment. Notes, patient continues to repeat, "It's inside me now." Third transfer attempt failed. Recommend permanent sedation. There was a handprint on the page, not ink, blood. 2:57 a.m. I started hearing whispering, dozens of voices overlapping, some crying, some laughing. They came from behind the east wing doors. Then came the knock. 3 knocks, rhythmic, deliberate. Then silence. Then the whisper. "It's time for the third." I don't know why, but I started sobbing. Something in me remembered that phrase. Something deep and primal screamed to run, but I couldn't move. My legs were jelly. My skin crawled. 3 a.m. The chains fell. I didn't see them move. I didn't hear them drop. They were just gone. The east wing doors opened slowly, creaking like they hadn't moved in decades. The hallway beyond was dark, but I saw them. 3 figures. One in a hospital gown, IV still in arm. One in a nurse's uniform, skin melted from the left side of her face. And the last looked like me. Same hoodie, same face, same bloodshot eyes. He stared at me and said, "You're the third. We've been waiting." Then he smiled, and everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. Clean sheets, monitors beeping. A nurse walked in and smiled warmly. "You had quite the episode," she said. "They found you passed out near the east wing. You're lucky nothing happened." I tried to speak. My throat was dry. I looked at my wrist. The hospital band read, "Patient number 3, do not transfer." That was 6 days ago. They won't let me leave. Every night the lights flicker at 2:44. At 3 o'clock, the door across from my bed opens on its own. A gurney rolls by, and sometimes when I look into the hallway mirror, I see the other me standing behind me, smiling, waiting. Because now I'm part of the ward, the night ward, and I think they're looking for their 4th. I used to work nights at St. Vincent's, not as a nurse, not a doctor, just a sitter. Night watch for high-risk patients, dementia cases, attempted suicides, folks recovering from surgery who might pull out their tubes in their sleep. It was easy money. Sit in a chair, make sure no one dies on your watch, chart vitals every hour, stay quiet. I never believed in ghosts. Not until room 616. Night 1. They didn't warn me about the room. They just said the patient was non-verbal, under post-op observation, and needed overnight monitoring. When I asked for the name, the charge nurse looked up slowly and said, "Just keep your badge on you." That should have been a red flag. But like I said, easy money. Room 616 was on the far end of the south wing, a short hallway with only 2 lights, both of which buzzed and flickered constantly. The moment I stepped into that hallway, the temperature dropped like I'd walked into a walk-in freezer. The door was already open. Inside, a man sat upright in bed. Pale skin, shaved head, thin surgical gown. No 4, no nameplate. The blinds were drawn and the TV was on. No picture, just static. I said, "Hello." No response. He just stared forward, not at me, not at the wall, just through everything. Night 2. When I returned, the same man was in the bed. Still no name, still no 4, still upright. But the TV was off this time. Instead, something was written on the window in what looked like dried blood. "Don't turn around." I asked the nurse about it. She shook her head and said, "He doesn't write. Never moves. Probably a prank. Just clean it off." I didn't clean it, because as I looked at the message, I could see my own reflection in the glass, and behind me, standing just inside the door, was someone else. But when I turned around, the room was empty, except for the man in the bed, who was now smiling. Night 3. I didn't want to go back. I almost didn't, but I needed the paycheck. I brought a thermos of coffee, a mini flashlight, and my earbuds. I figured I could drown out the static if it came back. When I entered 616, it smelled like rot, like roadkill left out in the sun, but colder. The man was lying down this time, eyes shut. First time I'd seen him sleep. At 2:13 a.m., I heard scratching. It came from under the bed. I shined my flashlight. Nothing. The scratching continued. I got on all fours, clicked the light again, and this time I saw fingers. Pale, thin fingers, gripping the floor from beneath the bed. Not attached to anything. They twitched once, and then the flashlight went out. When I looked back up, the man in the bed was gone. Night 4. I was ready to quit, but when I got to the security desk, the nurse manager handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter, typed, no signature. "Return to 616. Do not speak to him. Do not leave until 3:33 a.m., no matter what you see. You are being watched for clearance." Clearance? I had no idea what that meant, but when I looked up, the hallway cameras were pointed directly at the door to room 616. They'd never been before. Something was wrong with the hospital. Night 5. I arrived at 11:55 p.m. There were now restraints on the bed. The man wasn't restrained. The bed was, chained to the floor. The walls had deep gouges in them, as if someone had taken a piece of glass and carved lines, hundreds of them, until the paint peeled back. On the ceiling, someone had scrawled the word "already dead" in what looked like ash. I sat down, didn't blink, didn't speak. At 1:16 a.m., the lights in the hallway all cut off. Room 616 remained dimly lit. That's when I heard breathing. Not normal breathing. This was low, rasping, wet. It wasn't the man in the bed. It was right behind me. I didn't turn around. At 3:33, the door unlocked by itself and clicked open. I walked out. I didn't sleep that day. Night 6. I wasn't on the schedule, but I came in anyway. I had to know what was going on. When I got to 616, it was sealed. Biohazard tape, welded hinges, a paper sign taped to the door. Quarantined, structural collapse risk. But I could still hear the TV inside, static, and something else, a voice, my voice, repeating, "Don't turn around, don't turn around, don't turn." I don't remember how long I stood there. Security found me at 4 a.m., staring at the door, whispering to myself. 3 weeks later, I quit, but I still see that hallway in my dreams, still hear that breathing, still see that pale man, eyes blank, smile too wide, whispering things no one should know. Sometimes when I look into mirrors, I see room 616 behind me, just over my shoulder, like it's still watching me. And sometimes when I'm alone, the lights in my apartment flicker. At 3:33 a.m. exactly. I was in the hospital because of a headache. That's how it started. Just a pounding, throbbing pain behind my right eye that wouldn't go away. I thought it was a migraine, maybe dehydration. But when the vision in my right eye started to blur and I felt my fingers go numb, I panicked and drove myself to the ER. They admitted me around 9:40 p.m. That was the last time I remember seeing a clock. They said they needed to observe me overnight, just to be safe. I didn't argue. I was dizzy, nauseous, and scared out of my mind. They gave me a paper bracelet, rolled me down some unfamiliar hallway, and parked me in a small room with a stained ceiling tile and a buzzing wall sconce. The nurse who brought me in didn't say much, just checked my vitals, muttered something about bed overflow, and handed me a clipboard with a basic intake form. No TV, no windows, no clock, no roommate either. Just a single bed with gray sheets and a chair in the corner that looked like it hadn't been sat in since the Clinton administration. And one more thing, a second hospital bed, wrapped in plastic, stored upright against the far wall. Its wheels were locked, but I swear, when the nurse closed the door, it rattled. Hour 1, maybe 2. The first time I noticed the lights dim, I thought it was a power flicker, but the light didn't come back all the way. It stayed just a little too dark, not pitch black, but shadowy, like the whole room had gone underwater. My headache was getting worse. My vision pulsed in sync with it. That's when I saw the bed had moved. Not far, just a few inches. Now it wasn't flush with the wall. It was angled, just enough to be facing my bed. I stared at it for a long time. Then the intercom above me crackled. One long, shrill tone. No voice, no message. Just a single tone that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then silence. More time passed. I tried to leave, not dramatically, just to ask for a glass of water, or maybe something for the pain. But the door wouldn't open. There was no handle, just a thin black outline where the frame met the wall. No call button either. I was locked in, and the second bed had moved again. Now it was parallel to mine, still wrapped in plastic, but closer, almost halfway across the room. I wanted to believe it was my headache messing with me, but the wheels had left faint track marks on the floor. I slept, I think. When I opened my eyes, there was someone lying in the other bed. The plastic was still on, but it was stretched, distended over a shape beneath it. A human shape, breathing, slow, shuddering breaths like someone on the edge of death. I backed up, slamming into the wall behind me. The breathing grew faster. The plastic crackled. And then I saw the face, pressed against the inside of the plastic, just faintly visible beneath the film. It was my face, but wrong. Eyes blackened, skin bruised purple, a dried trickle of blood leaking from one nostril. Lips parted like it was screaming silently. I didn't move for what felt like hours. The room changed. There were no seams between floor and walls now, just gray. The ceiling tiles were gone, replaced with a dark, shifting surface that rippled like oil in a pan. The lights above me had stopped buzzing, because they had gone out. Now the only light came from the other bed. It glowed, not bright, just a sickly yellow warmth, like a candle behind wax paper. The body beneath the plastic sat up and began pulling at the edges, not to remove the covering, to stretch it, like it wanted me inside. The intercom spoke. Patient transfer authorized. Room 9B. Status. Ready for integration. The voice was mechanical, like someone reading off a checklist. I shouted. I screamed for help, pounded the walls, begged for a nurse, anyone to let me out. No answer. The bed wheels creaked again. It slid even closer, and this time it whispered. Not loud, not in the air, in my head. Lie down. You were always meant to lie down. I fell to my knees. My vision pulsed with red and black. My ears were ringing. Then, the plastic touched me, cold, static-laced, clinging to my skin. I blacked out. I woke up in another room, clean, literature monitors beeping, a different bed, different ceiling. There was a nurse this time. I asked her how long I'd been out. She smiled politely and said, "You've been in holding for 2 days. Just some observation. Nothing serious." I asked her where I was. Her smile widened but didn't reach her eyes. Room 9B. Then she left. There's a mirror on the wall here. It's small but big enough. I look into it often. Sometimes when I blink too slowly, the reflection lingers a moment too long, smiling back at me, breathing slower than I am, wearing my face, but not my eyes. The intercom comes on every night at 3:33 a.m. now, and it always says the same thing. Next patient ready for transfer. Please prepare the second bed.